Today we're taking a look at the Shadowbase 800FX case, courtesy of Be Quiet. The Shadowbase 800FX is a mid-tower case focused on maximum cooling with tasteful ARGB. This is a mid-tower case, but it's actually pretty large. We have plenty of room for components and cooling. You could either air cool or water cool in this case, but in my opinion, this case is prime for water cooling. There's way more than enough space to fit a couple of large radiators in here. You could even go in with a 420mm rad in the front or the top. The case will support any motherboard form factor from Mini ITX, which would be quite hilarious because it's so tiny in this case, all the way up to eATX. There's actually a decent amount of space after the ATX standoffs end before the main cable pass-through channel. The cable cover that's in the case now is in the left position, which gives you more space for water cooling. If you need a larger eATX board, you can move it to the right position. Like I said, this is definitely one of those larger type of cases where you can really get creative with your cooling solution. The FX model that I have here today includes 4 Lightwings 140mm fans, which in my opinion is quite nice. Those Lightwings fans do account for a bit of the cost, but it's actually a decent fan and they look good in my opinion. The Lightwings operate at a maximum rotational speed of about 1500 RPM at about 23.2 dBA with an airflow of 56 CFM at a static pressure rating of 1.49 millimeters to H2O. The FX model also comes with a fan hub, which does actually take up a drive mounting space in the backside, but the hub functions well, and it's going to save you some money from having to buy another accessory, so it's a win in my book. On top of the relatively good fans that are included, as well as the hub, the overall noise of the system is relatively low. I know that I don't want to be distracted by the sound coming from my computer while I'm editing videos. On the front side of this case, there is of course a mesh material. This is actually a cover that reveals a second finer mesh air filter. This finer mesh air filter directly covers the fans. Now, you can actually remove this internal finer mesh filter, but as somebody who has a cat, I'm definitely going to leave this installed. This filter will restrict airflow a little bit, but in my case, having this second finer mesh air filter is going to help keep my computer cleaner longer because it'll help filter out all of the dander and the hair from my cat. She pretty much likes to rub directly against the intakes on my PC. Awesome. Up on the top side, we also have a magnetic mesh filter. We have mesh built into the top of the case, and this will help filter any dust and debris that might fall on top of it. It's actually quite large and it looks like it's built well, so I'm happy with this filter. And looking at the very bottom of the case, we also have a filter on a tray. It extends the entire length of the case and you can just slide it out to clean it. It's a nice feature. In terms of fan mount locations, the top of the case supports both 120mm and 140mm fans. You can also do rads like I mentioned, and you can actually go all the way up to 420mm on the top or the front. It doesn't seem like you can install a 420mm rad on both the front and the top at the same time. It might be possible, but you're gonna have to get real creative with your radiators, fan choices, and where you route your tubes. I would probably recommend, if you're going full custom water loop, to do maybe one 420 and one 360. Be Quiet doesn't actually produce a 420mm radiator, so if all you want to do is water cool your CPU, I would probably leave the front fans in place and then install maybe the 280 or 360 pure loop up at the top. If you did want to water cool though, there's plenty of space in front of the fans on the front side to just bolt a rad on. I'm also testing out the Dark Rock 5 Pro and the Elite model, so I'll be using those instead of a water cooler in my testing today. But I did actually do a mock fit up afterwards, and the 280mm Pure Loop 2 fits without any issues. The Shadowbase 800FX case utilizes the classic lower PSU shroud to hide your power supply and excess cabling. It's a super nice detail that the shroud is actually mostly made out of metal, and then it has a front expansion area where you can pop it out in case you end up water cooling and you need a little bit of extra space in the front there for radiators, pumps, or just tubing. As for actually mounting the PSU, you can slide it in the side, but there's actually a PSU bracket that you mount the PSU to, so you can insert it from the back side. This case is relatively large, so there's basically no limit on how long your power supply can be, so you can pretty much go wild here. In this build, I'm using the Straight Power 12 1000 watt PSU. As for the front side of the case, you could either opt to install another 140mm fan here for either intake or exhaust, or you could install the optional 3.5mm hard drive bracket. If you needed extra storage in the form of 3.5-inch hard drives, you could purchase the optional accessory that allows you to mount 2 of them in this PSU shroud. Generally speaking, most people aren't going crazy for hard drives anymore, and in fact, most gaming and mid-range workstation builds are just going to be all SSD these days. We do have a couple of SSD mounts on the backside of the case, and we do actually have a 2-mount 3.5-inch hard drive mounting location. It is just a 2-point hang mount for the hard drives, but it is something if you need it. While we're looking at the backside of the panel does have that signature sound dampening material that Be Quiet utilizes on most of their cases. I really like this because it adds a ton of rigidity to the panel, and it actually does help reduce the noise. The only real downside is it does contribute to the weight of the case a little bit, and on that note, it actually brings me to the glass side panel. The glass side panel is about 4mm thick, it looks like. It's very thick, very strong, but it is also very heavy. It contributes to the overall total weight of this case being over 27 pounds empty. So again, very large case, very nice quality, but it is a little bit heavy. In general, I would say the build quality for the Shadow Base 800FX is very high. There's no sharp corners, everything is sleek and smooth. The installation experience was very easy. There are tons of cable pass-throughs above the motherboard and to the side of it and below it. There's tons of space under the PSU shroud for routing cabling or tubing, and just from working in the case in general, it looks like this would really be a dream to set up a full water cooling loop. There's plenty of space. You can install 3 radiators in here very easily and really dissipate quite a lot of heat. So yeah, the Shadow Base 800FX is really going to shine for people who are water cooling, but you can definitely air cool in this case as well. If you can fill the build out, it's really going to look nice. Before we get into the cooling performance, I did just want to note that the PCI Express slots on the back side of the case can actually be rotated to be vertical in case you want to vertical mount your GPU. Generally, I don't recommend that, but I know that it does look cool, and it doesn't really matter if you're water cooling. I don't really like losing a bunch of access to the PCI Express slots, but it's nice that Be Quiet does build this into the case for you. Now let's take a look at the cooling performance. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be using the DarkRock 5 Pro to cool my Ryzen 7700X. I'm running 32GB of G.Skill DDR5 5600 and the PowerColor RX 7600 GPU. For the testing, I ran the Lightwings fans at 50% speed with the DarkRock Pro at 50% as well. I really like running Asus Realbench because it stresses the GPU and the CPU at the same time, and it gives you an idea of the case's capability for overall airflow. Just for reference, my ambient temperature during testing was about 68 Fahrenheit or about 20 C. Another note, the Ryzen CPUs will always jump to 95C if you're talking about the newer AM5 CPUs. They generally add tons of voltage in the auto configuration as well. So for this test, I limited my 7700X to 4.9 GHz all-core at 1.3 volts. I did end up running this test twice since the DarkRock Pro 5 supports a low and high performance mode. Each time I ran it for an hour to get all of the data. In the first test, I did the 50% low speed on the DarkRock Pro 5, as well as 50% case fan speeds. The Ryzen 7700X averaged about 89.1 C across all of its cores, with a total sound output of about 29.2 dBA. I measured the sound output at about 3 feet with my S22 Ultra. Next, I bumped up the DarkRock Pro to the 50% high-speed setting. I left the system fans at 50%, and then I saw the cores of the 7700X average about 85 C at about 31.4 dBA. Out of curiosity for maximum cooling performance, I did rerun the test with the system fans at 100% as well as the DarkRock Pro 5. The Ryzen 7700X cores actually dropped to about an average of 82.6 Celsius with a sound output of 38 dBA. This did drop the overall temperature, but I'm not sure if the sound increase was worth it, so I would probably run the system fans around 50 to 75%. As for the GPU, the RX 7600 averaged about 54 to 56 Celsius, so it was running relatively cold during this test. I would say the front intakes provided more than enough air for it. In general, I don't really have enough heat coming out of my GPU and CPU to really actually stress this case, so the overall amount of airflow is very high, I would say. And that makes sense, since we have 4 140mm fans, each pushing about 56 CFM with a decent static pressure. Even if I did add some higher power and higher heat output components, I'm very confident that the air could be cycled through the case very quickly. Considering we have 3 140mm fans in the front, the capability to add 3 at the top and the rear. I know that I haven't built a full custom water loop in a long time, but this case actually makes me want to kind of test one out again. So I would say, to sum this up, it's a really nice case. I would say it even borders on the premium case territory, and it was super easy to work in. It's not the cheapest case out there, but it's huge. You're going to be able to really build in this case, and you can probably carry this case along for multiple generations of your gaming PC or workstation build. Right around the time that I'm creating this video, the case is going for anywhere around $200 to $210, and I think that's actually a pretty good deal. With the ability to fit pretty much any AIO or full water cooling setup out there, eATX compatibility, you could fit any length GPU and PSU, and you can fit air coolers up to 170, maybe 172 millimeters, which is crazy huge, by the way. I think this case is going to be hard to beat. Overall, I would say this is a very solid case, and I'm definitely going to reuse the case in future builds on the channel. If this one helped you out, smash that thumbs up button, and then get subscribed to the channel for more reviews and gaming builds. I also do some home lab server stuff. Until next time, stay cool.